When we look at history or even modern leadership, we tend to categorize people pretty quickly. He was a good leader, she was a bad leader. We like those clean labels. But the text we are looking at today, covering the turbulent era of the divided kingdom of Israel and Judah, completely shatters those boxes.
It really does. We are looking at a fascinating stretch of history here, 1 Kings 15 and 2 Chronicles, chapters 13 through 16. It's a story of massive battles, family betrayal, and political intrigue. But underneath all that noise, it's actually a profound psychological study on reliance. Specifically, why is it that sometimes the bad guys have moments of perfect faith, while the good guys end up bitter and cynical?
That's a great hook. It sounds almost like a modern corporate drama. You have the upstart, the established CEO, and the hostile takeover. Let's start with Abijah. He takes the throne in Judah after Rehoboam. Now, 1 Kings gives him a pretty rough report card, doesn't it?
It does. 1 Kings essentially says his heart wasn't right with God. He walked in the sins of his father. If you only read that account, you'd write him off as just another failed monarch. But then you flip over to 2 Chronicles 13 and you get this cinematic high-stakes moment that complicates everything. Abijah is facing Jeroboam, the king of the northern tribes.
And the numbers here are staggering. The text mentions Jeroboam bringing 800,000 mighty men of valor against Abijah's 400,000. Even if we view these numbers as symbolic of a massive disparity, Abijah is outnumbered 2-1.
Exactly. It's a death sentence. Strategically, Judah is finished. But then Abijah does something unexpected. He stands up on Mount Zimarim and gives this incredibly passionate, almost theological speech. He calls out Jeroboam not just for the rebellion, but for the spiritual betrayal, driving out the priests, setting up golden calves. Abijah essentially says, "You have the numbers, but we have the covenant."
It's interesting because he specifically mentions a covenant of salt. That sounds incredibly permanent.
It is. A covenant of salt implies something that cannot rot or decay. It's an unbreakable promise. And despite Abijah's personal flaws, in this moment of crisis, he leans entirely on that promise. The text describes an ambush. Jeroboam surrounds them, front and rear. It's a checkmate move. But the men of Judah cry out to God, the priests blow the trumpets, and the dynamic flips.
So the bad king, in his darkest hour, relies on God and wins a decisive victory. Jeroboam never recovers from that defeat.
Right? And that's the first paradox. Sometimes desperation produces a clarity of faith that comfort never can. But then the story shifts to the next generation. Abijah dies, and his son Asa takes the throne, and Asa is a breath of fresh air.
Asa seems like the model reformer. The text says he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, and he doesn't waste time. He starts tearing down idols, smashing pillars. He even goes after his own family.
That is the part that always shocks me. He removes Makkah, his grandmother, the queen mother, from her position because she made an abominable image for an Asherah pole.
That's a bold political move. Firing your grandmother? That sends a message to the whole administration that nobody is safe if they compromise.
It surely does. Asa cuts down the idol and burns it at the brook Kidron. And for 10 years, the land is quiet. He builds fortified cities, the economy grows, and he explicitly tells the people, "We have peace because we sought the Lord." He connects their prosperity directly to their spiritual fidelity.
But peace doesn't last forever. Enter Zerah the Ethiopian.
And this is the biggest threat Judah has likely ever faced. We are talking about an army of 1,000,000 troops and 300 chariots. If Abijah was outnumbered 2-1, Asa is facing an annihilation force.
This is the testing point. He's had 10 years of peace and building projects. Does he trust his walls? Does he trust his economy?
He doesn't. And this is Asa's finest hour. He goes out to the valley of Zephathah and he prays, one of the most beautiful prayers in the Old Testament. He says, "Lord, there is no one besides you to help. Help us, O Lord our God, for we rely on you." He acknowledges that numbers are irrelevant to God, and the result is total victory. The Ethiopian army is crushed.
So at this point in the narrative, Asa is a hero. He's virtually untouchable. He's listened to the prophet Azariah. He's renewed the covenant. People are even defecting from the northern tribes to join him because they see God is with him. It feels like the happily ever after moment.
It should be. But this is where human nature gets complicated. Fast forward to the 36th year of his reign. Asa has been king for decades. He's wealthy, experienced, and successful. Then, Baasha, the king of Israel, starts a border dispute. He fortifies a place called Ramah to blockade Judah.
Now compare the threats. A 1,000,000-man army from Ethiopia versus a border blockade by a neighboring king. Rama is an annoyance, a strategic problem, but it's not an existential threat like Zerah was.
Exactly. And that is the trap. When the problem was too big for Asa, he fell on his knees. Now that the problem seems manageable, he reaches for his wallet. He doesn't pray. He doesn't seek the prophet. He takes the silver and gold, including the treasures he had dedicated to the temple, and sends them to Ben-Hadad, the king of Syria.
He buys a mercenary army. He bribes a pagan king to break a treaty with Israel and attack them from the north.
And here's the thing, it works. From a purely geopolitical standpoint, it's a brilliant maneuver. Syria attacks the north, Baasha panics and abandons Ramah, and Asa swoops in, takes the building materials Baasha left behind, and builds up his own cities, Geba and Mizpah. Mission accomplished.
But then the bill comes due. Not the financial bill, but the spiritual one.
Enter Hanani the seer. He walks into the court of this successful, victorious king and drops a hammer. He says, "Because you relied on the king of Syria, and not on the Lord your God, the army of the king of Syria has escaped you." He points out the absurdity of it. You defeated the Ethiopians with God's help, but you needed to pay off the Syrians for a minor border skirmish?
And he delivers that famous line, "For the eyes of the Lord run back and forth throughout the whole earth, to show himself strong in the behalf of them whose heart is perfect toward him."
It's a haunting verse. God was looking for an opportunity to show his strength again, and Asa denied him that opportunity by handling it himself. Asa chose realpolitik over faith.
You would expect Asa, the man who fired his grandmother for idolatry, to repent, to say, "You know what? I got arrogant. I'm sorry."
But he doesn't. He snaps. He throws the prophet in prison. He puts him in stocks. And the text adds a chilling detail. Asa oppressed some of the people at the same time. The benevolent reformer has become a paranoid tyrant. He couldn't handle the criticism.
It's a tragic decline. And it gets physical, too. In his old age, he gets a severe disease in his feet.
And even then, there is no turning back. The text explicitly notes. Yet in his disease, he did not seek the Lord, but just the physicians. Now, the Bible isn't anti-medicine, but the contrast here is intentional. Asa had stopped looking up. He only looked horizontally, to politics, to money, to human experts. He died a successful king in the eyes of the world, buried with great spices and a huge fire in his honor. But spiritually, he withered away.
It really forces us to ask a difficult question. Why is it harder to trust God when we are successful than when we are desperate?
I think it's because success creates the illusion of control. When you are Abijah facing 800,000 men, or Asa facing the Ethiopians, you have zero control. You have to surrender. But when you have a full treasury, a strong reputation, and 35 years of experience, you start thinking, I can handle this. I don't need to bother God with this.
We shift from reliance to resourcefulness. And while resourcefulness is good, in this narrative, it becomes an idol. It replaces the relationship.
Precisely. The tragedy of Asa isn't that he failed, it's that he succeeded in the wrong way. He secured his border, but he lost his peace. He built cities, but he imprisoned the truth-teller.
It's a sobering reminder that finishing well is a completely different skill set than starting well.
Absolutely. Starting well requires courage. Finishing well requires humility. And as we see with Asa, humility is often the first casualty of long-term success.
So the takeaway for our listeners today? Maybe it's to look at the Rama in your life, the manageable problems, and ask, am I trying to buy my way out of this? Or am I still relying on the source that got me here?
That's the question, because the eyes of the Lord are still running to and fro, looking for a heart that is completely His, not just in the crisis, but in the day-to-day grind of success.
A powerful place to end. Thanks for walking us through these two kings, B.
My pleasure.
And thank you all for listening. Until next time, keep reading and keep thinking.
If you have been blessed by this, please like, subscribe, and share this joy with others. God bless.